Hello and a very warm welcome to the channel. It's time for another reaction video. This will be the first one I've done for nearly a year. So this is a request I got from Instagram. It's from the General Knowledge channel and it is How Did Each U.S. State Get Its Name? Which is something that, when I think about it, it's a really interesting question and I know virtually nothing about. There are a handful, I think the Dakotas were named after a Native American tribe and the Carolinas were named after one of the King Charleses, I assume, but I might be wrong about that. I know Virginia was named after the fact that Queen Elizabeth I of England's never had sex, which I always think is a hilarious thing to name a territory after. And I wish it was done more often. I think all rulers should name territories based on the number of sexual partners they had. But no, apparently we're just going to do it as a one-off, and I genuinely wonder what she made of that. But yeah, anyway. So I think this will be really good fun. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. Please do give us a like. It really helps the channel. And let's go. Let's go. George Washington.
The United States of America are a federal country. Their territory is therefore divided into 50 states, 48 continental plus Alaska and Hawaii. There's a joke that nobody can successfully name the 50 states in one sitting ever since...
It's crazy how different some of them are in size. Like the difference between New Jersey and Texas or Alaska is incredible.
Friends did an episode where Ross went crazy trying to figure it out. In this video, we're not just going to list out the 50 states. We're going to understand why each of them has the name that it does.
Sounds
Let's
good.
start with some general characterizations. State names come from a variety of languages. 24 derive from indigenous languages of the Americas, the Native American idioms, although sometimes through European adaptations. 22 other state names derive from actual European languages.
So that's really interesting. The fact that most of the ones on the East Coast and the West Coast are from European origin and the ones in the centre are Native American. Because I presume that reflects the colonisation of America happened obviously first big time on the East Coast. From I know there was sort of the Oregon Trail and they reached the West Coast states, which were very suitable for habitation. And I think some of the states in the middle were kind of colonised a bit more higgledy-piggledy. It took more time. So that would kind of make sense.
Languages and words. And the 6 remaining ones have unclear origins, but we'll get to those in a minute. Of the 50 states, 11 are named after an individual person. Of those 11, 7 are named in honor of European monarchs. The 2 Carolinas, the 2 Virginias.
Yes, I knew it was King. I knew it was Charles or something. I didn't know it was Charles. I didn't know if it was Charles I or Charles II. I was pretty sure it wasn't Charles III, and I'm pleased to say I was right about that.
Maryland, Louisiana, and Georgia. Over the years, several attempts have been made to name a state after one of the founding fathers or other great statesmen of U.S. history. The state of Franklin, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Washington, with only the last one becoming a state.
Interesting.
The origin of the names vary a lot, depending on each state, as we'll see now. But there is a somewhat common pattern in many of them, having the initial origin in a native tribal group of the region that led to the naming of a local river, then to a colonial territory that shared the name with the river, and then transitioning into statehood. So now, let's go, one by one.
It sounds like they sort of did it almost by accident as a tribute to the kind of local Native American tribes, which I like, even if it is an accident.
And understand the known or predicted origin of each state. I posted timestamps in the description, by the way, so if you want to skip ahead to a specific state, you can use that. Starting with the 2 non-contiguous states. Alaska's name comes from a native language, Aleut, spoken in this chain of islands. They use the word Alasksuck, which I'm mispronouncing, to describe the meaning of mainland, or if we literally translate it, the object towards which the action of the sea is directed. So the place where the waves hit, I guess. Alaska was first colonized by the Russian Empire, who then sold it to the United States.
It is genuinely insane how much territory the United States managed to buy. In terms of like the expansion of the United States, so much it was purchased from France, from Spain, from Russia, as opposed to being conquered, which I think is virtually unique amongst the countries of the world. I certainly can't think of anything comparison. If you can, please comment below.
In this native word, Alyaska, the name the empire baptized their colony with in the year 1666. Hawaii's
didn't know as
name
early as
origin,
that.
on the other hand, is less certain. The first year in which the usage of the name Hawaii is...
Because Hawaii, I know, was an independent kingdom at one point, which is interesting because I think a handful of the US states, I think, obviously Texas was very briefly an independent state, and there was the Vermont Republic, which I think was a fully independent state, sort of from the revolution to I think a couple of years after they joined the union. So I'm always really interested in those states were very briefly were full-on countries.
registered was in 1870.
Also, got to say, love the flag. Top left corner, especially, if they've done a good job on that.
With the original spelling having an apostrophe between the i's. The origin is uncertain because there are two hypotheses. One is it coming from Hawaii, meaning place of the gods, the mythological homeland of the Polynesians, and the other is it being named after Wailoa, a legendary discoverer of the Hawaiian Islands.
Interesting.
Moving to the continental United...
And I know there's like a show on, I think it's Apple with Jason Momoa about the history of Hawaii, which I really want to watch. I just haven't got Apple, so yeah, that's bugging me.
United States. Let's start in the West Coast with California. California got its name from Spanish explorers, choosing the name Las Californias for the peninsula of Baja California and to Alta California, the region that became the present-day state of California. The name likely derived from the mythical island of California in the fictional story of Queen Calafia, as recorded in a book from the year 1510, The Adventures of Esplandian by Garci Rodriguez de Montalvo. In the story, this fictional queen fought alongside Muslim allies, and so some say the name may have been chosen by the author to be similar to the title of a Muslim leader, the Caliph. In 1846, the US conquered California from Mexico. And
that's insane. It's named after like a fake country that someone. It would be like calling a state like Gondor or Narnia, but with some kind of Islamic connection. I had no idea.
Spanish name was kept. California's name is therefore likely to have come from a book. And speaking of books, let me quickly tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Blinkist. Are you like me, who constantly buys books but then has little time to actually read them? If so, you might like what Blinkist offers.
I must admit, book shopping, I know it's sort of typical bloke thing. I hate shopping, except for book shopping. I can spend a day in a bookshop, and I will be more than happy. Like I come out and the rest of the world is destroyed.
Up to 65% off the regular price. 14 million people already use Blinkist.
So obviously, I'll put a link to the original video in the description. Please do go support them. Thus far, it seems like a great channel, and I always want to support the original creator. So.
Of these great generals' conquests in just over 20 minutes, the first 100 people to go to Blinkist.com/general knowledge are going to get unlimited free access for a week to try it out. You can cancel anytime, and if you choose to continue on to a full...
I mean, you probably won't be the first now, because I think this video is now a couple of years, but there's a very slight chance that none of the other 2 million people who watch this video have done
Next to
that.
California is Nevada. Also having been named by the Spanish, most of these south/west states were first part of the Spanish colonial empire, then Mexico, and then finally conquered by the US. The name sort of means snow-covered, and comes from the local...
That's fascinating, because I was in Nevada last September, and the last thing I saw is snow. My main recollection was it was baking hot and a lot of desert. So, yeah, that's perhaps the Spanish got a good sense of humour.
Mountain range, Sierra Nevada.
To be fair, we didn't go there.
The state's name appears to originate from an earlier Spanish name, Arizonac, which derives from the O'odham name Alisonac, meaning small spring. O'odham was a native language, although some point out that the Basque language spoken in northern Spain also has the phrase Aritz Ona, which means the good oak, as there were numerous Basque sheep herders in the area, but it's more likely that the origin is the native word. Apparently there is a misconception that the state's name originated from the Spanish term arida zona, meaning arid zone. This is
that would make more sense. It is definitely arid. I've got to say, Arizona was stunningly beautiful, and it's also got, I think, one of my favourite state flags.
Considered a case of folk etymology and is not accurate, but if there's no official record, who knows? Further north is Oregon. The name origin of Oregon is disputed and therefore unknown. There are 4 options, it having Spanish, native, Portuguese, or French origin. The Spanish could have named it after the word oregano, referring to a plant which grows in the southern part of the region, after a stream in Spain called the Arroyo del Oregón, or after the term orejón, meaning big ear, with the J then turning into a G. The native origin possibility is evident in a 1765 petition to the British king. Robert Rogers, an American colonial frontiersman, wrote, and from thence the river called by the Indians Oregon. In 1904, the local Sunset magazine,
I mean, that sounds like quite a strong case to me.
argued the name came from a Portuguese explorer who had named it Ov Agua, meaning hearing water, after the sound the waterfalls made, with that name then being adapted to Oragua and then Oregon. This one seems kind of a stretch, to be honest. Or the French
Yeah, I
possibility,
agree.
where the name would come from the spelling of a local river as Waricon, although this would likely be an adaptation of the native name we saw in the second option. Above Oregon is the state of Washington. This one is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
All we need to do is look at the flag.
It's Denzel Washington, isn't it? Stupid question.
Named after George Washington, whose surname was, in turn, derived from the town of Washington in the historic county of Durham, England. Oddly, the territory was to be named Columbia, after the Columbia River, but they found the name too similar to the District of Columbia, the national capital, which itself contains a city named Washington.
Interesting. But hang on a second. They didn't name it Columbia so they wouldn't get it mixed up with DC. But they then named it Washington, meaning people still get it mixed up with DC. You could have picked any other word. But no, that's weird. I genuinely, I know they said at the beginning that none of the other founding fathers had a state named after them. I really want to know why that was. So if you know, please do put in the comments. I'd be really interested.
So, Washington became the only state named after a U.S. president. To the east is Idaho. The name was initially proposed for the colonial territory of Colorado, after a supposed native term, but when people realized the native term didn't exist, they abandoned the idea. However, it was too late. Years later, it fell into common usage and ended up being proposed for the actual name of the territory. An alternative etymology attributes the name to the Apache word Idahe, which means enemy. An Apache term was also used by the Spanish to name Utah.
I got that one is amazing. I love the first version, but it was just someone made a mistake and they're like, we're sticking with it. Everyone knows it. It's too late to change it.
Utah, but with a Y, from the Apache term Yuda, was the Spanish designation for the local people, which meant high. After becoming part of the US, the term was adapted into English, becoming Utah. Back south, New Mexico. This one is pretty straightforward too, from the Spanish Nuevo Mexico, meaning the new Mexico. In turn, the name Mexico comes from the Nahuatl native language, which referred to the Aztec people who founded the city of Tenochtitlan.
Don't think they do human sacrifice in New Mexico. I might be wrong about that, and I don't want to judge a culture if that's the case, but I don't think so.
Colorado was also named by the Spanish in 1743. It roughly means colored, but in this case it meant ruddy or red, originally referring to the Colorado River and its muddy color. Wyoming gets its name from the Wyoming Valley in Pennsylvania, which itself got its name from a Munsee word, another native language. This one, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, and it literally meant big river flat.
Isn't Pennsylvania, though, right in the east? I'm a bit confused by that.
That is, again, super straightforward. It means mountain in Spanish. Montaña del Norte was the name given by the early Spanish explorers to the entire mountainous region of western North America. It was proposed by the US government for the territory that ended up becoming Idaho, but then changed as they thought it had no meaning, only to be proposed in 1864, once again, for what is now Montana. There were some complaints, again, especially because it was somewhat misleading, since Montana itself is not that mountainous. In the name of Shoshone, a native tribe,
I mean, Greenland's not green. What can you do?
Was proposed, but the Committee of Territories ignored it and stuck with Montana. North and South Dakota have the same name minus the geographic indicator, named after the Dakota Sioux Native American tribes. And Dakota is actually also a word in the language.
And if I'm right, that's the tribe that the Americans fought the Custer fought at Little Bighorn, I think. I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure it is, though.
These people literally meaning allies or friends. Nebraska's name comes from the native Chiwer, specifically the word Nebrask, which literally means flat in the water. It was first chosen as the name for the Nebraska River and then for the territory and state. I have to be honest, I was not aware so many states had a native origin in their names. Kansas is named after the Kansas River, which in turn was named after the Kansas Native Americans who lived along its banks. The tribe's name is often said to mean people of the south wind, although this was probably probably not the term's original meaning. In 1827, the Kansas Territory was established, choosing this name for that reason. Arkansas has a very similar name, just adding a prefix to the word, and the origin is also similar. The name Arkansas initially applied to the Arkansas River. It derives from a French term, a plural for their transliteration of Akansa, an Algonquin term for the Kapow people. Akansa is likely also the root term for Kansa, which then led to the Kansas name. Oklahoma is the putting together of two Choctaw words, Okla and Homa.
It is actually impressive how many of these states are named after Native Americans. I didn't realise that. I assumed they were either named by Europeans or were named by kind of white Americans during the expansion. I mean, I did know about Dakota, but beyond that, I did not realise so many of these had like native roots.
Choctaw Okla means tribe or nation, and Homa means red, so Red Nation, although a rough translation could also be Indian Territory. Moving on to the biggest state of the continental 48, Texas. Texas's name origin is in the word Taisha, which means friend in the native Caddo language. Oddly enough, during Spanish colonial rule in the 18th century, the area was briefly known as New Philippines, given that the Asian country was at the time also a Spanish colony. How weird would it be if that had stuck around?
Yeah. Also, naming a colony after a colony is kind of a power play for an empire, right?
Texas was, similarly to New York or New Jersey, now called New Philippines. Louisiana is again very straightforward, as was evident on the thumbnail of the video. It was named after Louis XIV, King of France from 1643 to 1715. When René Robert Cavelier claimed the territory for France, he named it La Louisiane. So roughly, Louis plus Yann carries the idea of related to Louis or land of Louis. Once part of the French colonial empire, the Louisiana territory stretched from the Atlantic coast in the south to just north of the present-day Canada border.
Which makes sense because in the Louisiana Purchase, I know the United States got a lot more than just the current state of Louisiana. But it's interesting that just that one state kept the name and the rest got kind of their own names.
The territory was sold by the French to the United States in 1803 for $15 million. That's 4 cents an acre. This would be equivalent to around $300 million in today's money. Still a pretty cheap price
That's
for
a
something
bargain.
that is
I presume the reason they sold it so cheap was the French had a pretty good idea that obviously this was during the Napoleonic War and that they were in no position to resist should the Americans just decide to take the territory. And therefore they may as well get some sort of loose change from it.
Equivalent to almost a third of the U.S.'s territory. Mississippi follows the trend of being named after the local river, the Mississippi, which defines its western boundary. European settlers named it after the Ojibwe word Mississippi, which translates to Great River. The Missouri River also led to the naming of the state of Missouri, and the river itself got its name from the indigenous Missouri natives. Following that method we saw was common at the start of the video, native tribe, river, colonial territory, and state. It is said that these specific natives were called the Wimisorita, meaning those who have dug out canoes. The name was adapted
That's a pretty cool name.
and westernized according to how they pronounced it. Moving on to Iowa. Iowa derives its name from the Iowa people, one of the many Native American nations whose territory was within the future state at the time of European colonization. Minnesota comes from the Native Dakota designation for the Minnesota River, which got its name from one of two words in Dakota, Minnesota, which means clear blue water, or Nisota, which means cloudy water. Kind of an odd choice of words considering they sound so similar but mean pretty much the exact opposite. It is said Dakota people demonstrated the name.
Yeah, it either means clear water or not clear water. One of the two. Just narrowing it down for you.
Early settlers by dropping milk into water and calling it Minnesota, which would mean the cloudy meaning would be the right one. Next, Wisconsin. The word Wisconsin originates from the name given to the Wisconsin River by one of the Algonquin-speaking tribes. French explorer Jacques Marquette was the first European to reach the Wisconsin River, arriving in 1673 and calling the river Mescousin. Subsequent French writers changed the spelling to Wisconsin, and over time this became the name for both the river and the surrounding lands. And then it was adapted into English. When it comes to Illinois, the state is named for the French adaptation of a native word, Ilenwiwa, which means speak normally. This adaptation was made by early French Catholic missionaries and explorers who referred to the local natives as such. Eventually the state...
Okay, that speaks normally. I mean, a little bit condescending, if you don't mind me saying, but, different times, I guess.
was named after that tribe. Michigan has...
Imagine if your country was called Speaks Normally by another country. How would you take that? It's definitely very much a backhand compliment.
A similar story, a native name adapted and rephrased into French. However, this one didn't refer to the local population. It was just a term they used to define large water or large lake.
Interesting.
Meshigami in the Ojibwe language. Let's jump to the northeast and go along the coast for the other ones, starting with Maine. The origin of the name Maine is unclear. One theory is that it was named after the French province of Maine. Another is that it derives from a practical nautical term, the mainland, and a more recent proposal is that it was named after the English village of Broadmain, which was the family estate of Sir Ferdinando Gorges, the colony's founder. A combination
that's a name, isn't it? Sir Ferdinando Gorges. They don't make people like that anymore.
Last two seems to be the most likely. New Hampshire was named by English Captain John Mason, who had gotten a land patent to establish a colony in the area. After doing so, he named it New Hampshire after the county.
Which is where I live. I live in Hampshire, North Hampshire. I'll have to visit New Hampshire one day, see if they are actually similar.
Of Hampshire in England. Vermont's name comes from the combination of two French words, vert and mont, green mountain. Vert in French means green and mont means mount or mountain, likely because of the green mountains that characterize the state. In fact, the short-lived independent...
That looks very impressive.
Vermont Republic used as its ensign the Green Mountain Boys flag. Massachusetts takes us back into native origins. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was named after the indigenous population, whose name likely came from a native word, Muswakshasut. I'm really sorry I'm mispronouncing all of these, but I just couldn't find the proper pronunciation. And this term directly translates to Big Mountain. Moving on to Rhode Island. Despite its name, most of Rhode Island is located on the mainland of the United States. Prior to 2020, the state's official name was State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, which was created after the merger of 4 colonial settlements. In 2020, they finally got rid of the plantations part because of the negative historical connotation, and if nothing else, because it's not a plantation anymore. It's not certain where the original name of Rhode Island came from, but 2 historical origins are presented as possibilities. One comes from explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano, who thought an offshore island of the region resembled the island of Rhodes off the coast of Greece, and the other has to do with a Dutch explorer, Adrian Blok, who described it as an island of reddish appearance, which was Godelijk Island in 17th century Dutch. This would have then been adapted into Rhode Island in English. Connecticut is once again of native origin. Kinitukut was an Eastern Algonquin word which meant...
So there's a couple of states named after the Algonquin, even though they're actually quite far apart. So did this tribe move around quite a lot? Was it quite a big tribe? Kind of interested how that happened.
Land on the long tidal river. New Jersey follows New Hampshire's example and is named after Jersey, the largest of the British Channel Islands, and the birthplace of one of the colony's 2 co-founders, Sir George de Carteret. However, the state was...
Really nice place, Jersey. I've got family from Guernsey, which is the other main Channel Island.
Initially created under the name of New Caesarea, because the Roman name of the original Jersey was thought to have been this during the times of the Roman Empire. And New York continues this trend, being named after the then Duke of York, later King James II of England, so both after the English town and its Duke. Next,
so it's kind of named after the Duke, who was named after, or at least his sort of official title name came after the town.
Is Pennsylvania. An English writer founded the province of Pennsylvania as an English colony. In honor of his father, and probably his family in general, he named it Pennsylvania, combining their name, Penn, and the Latin term Sylvania, which translates as woodlands. Delaware gets its name from the Delaware River. The river itself was named after Lord Delaware, who was the first Governor General of the colony of Virginia. And Maryland, named by George Calvert, the first Baron of Baltimore, after Queen Henrietta Maria, wife of King Charles
I did not know that there was one named after a queen. Well, I obviously I knew Virginia, but a queen consort rather than a queen in her own right.
First of England.
It would be like naming a territory after Camilla, which I would love to see. If Britain ever has a colony on the moon, I want them to name it after Queen Camilla, just because that would be brilliant.
Although some Catholic scholars believe the Baron named the province after Mary, the mother of Jesus. Virginia was the first British colony in continental North America. Its name at the time meant Country of the Virgin, after Elizabeth I of England, who was known as the Virgin Queen because she never married. West Virginia obviously has the same origin, with the West referring to their possession over the Western.
I genuinely don't like if you were Queen Elizabeth I and you sent out some explorer and they came back to England, they're like, we named a country after you. Yeah, what is it? Elizabethville? Elizabethland? No, we decided to focus on your number of sexual partners. I don't know what I would make of that. It's all a bit of a subtle hint, isn't it? Like you might want to get on with it because otherwise we're going to have some Hanoverians come over.
Territories of the formerly larger Virginia state upon separation. Ohio gets its name from a Seneca native word, Ohio, meaning large creek, originally the name of both the Ohio and Allegheny rivers. Indiana's name is very simple and means the
Now, that's a
land
cool
of
flag.
Indians or simply Indian land. When in 1800 the United States Congress passed legislation to divide the Northwest Territory into two areas, it named the western section the Indiana Territory, perhaps to differentiate it from the east where further colonization by Europeans had taken place, moving to Kentucky. In 1776, Virginia's colony included most of England's claims.
Wait. So Kentucky was the colony of Virginia when Virginia was the colony of Britain. But even the colonies have colonies.
In North America, and the counties beyond the Appalachian Mountains became known to Europeans as Kentucky County, named for the Kentucky River. The origin of the name is uncertain, but probably based on an Iroquois name meaning on the meadow. In the two native languages of Mohawk or Seneca, it was said as Kentucky or Gedake, respectively. Others have suggested the term Kenta-Aki, which could have come from an Algonquin language. Tennessee's name comes
the Algonquin again. Those guys get around. I have to Google the Algonquin.
From the local Cherokee too, which had a village called Tanazi located on a river with the same name. The meaning of this name is unknown, although some accounts suggest it meant something like meeting place. Moving to the Carolinas, North and South Carolina were one colony, Carolina, until 1729. By 1663, King Charles II of England granted a charter to start a new colony on the North American continent, and apparently he ordered it to be named Carolina in honor of his father, Charles I.
Of course, Charles I was the guy that was beheaded at the end of the English Civil War, so he's not one of the most fondly remembered English or British monarchs.
Alabama was named after the Alabama River.
I wonder how many times he did it. They could have named it after that. I think he had quite a few mistresses, so it would probably be quite a few times.
Which in turn was named by the Europeans due to the native Alabama tribe. In the native language, the word for a person of this specific native lineage is also Albamo. Georgia was named after British King George II. It is the feminine Latin form of George. It was also a reference to Saint George, whose name was derived from the Greek word Georgos, meaning farmer, from ge, which is earth, and ergon, which is work. And finally,
what I do find quite interesting is that obviously I completely understand Native American names, but it's interesting that they chose to keep the European names, including the sort of British names, even after the United States had broken away and fought a war against the British Empire. Oh, that's quite interesting that they didn't decide to sort of rename them all to try and sort of cut any residual British ties.
Florida, was named by the Spanish in 1514 from the Spanish term Florida, often referring to a place's abundance of flowers. The state's name
Gatorville would be a much better name.
Is a shortening of La Florida, the flowery one, or Pascua Florida, flowery Easter, although then just being simplified to Florida. It is the oldest surviving European given place name in the US. The United States also have some territories and a federal district. Very quickly, the name origins of those are in Washington, D.C. or District of Columbia. The name comes from Christopher Columbus, the famous European navigator. American Samoa is composed of...
Oh yeah, of course. But I was thinking the Washington bit, yeah. Stupid question.
Two parts, Sa meaning sacred and Moa meaning center, so the name can mean holy center. Alternately, it can also mean place of the sacred Moa bird of Polynesian mythology. Guam comes from the local Chamorro language, specifically the word Guahan, meaning what we have, a designation for the island first used in the Treaty of Paris of 1898. The Northern Mariana Islands were named by Spain in 1667 after Queen Mariana of Austria. Puerto Rico comes from the name the Spanish gave to the island in 1493, meaning rich port. Oddly enough, the island was originally named San Juan Bautista after St. John, and the capital city was named Puerto Rico. But eventually they switched the two. The island became Puerto Rico and the capital San Juan. The U.S. Virgin Islands were also named in 1493.
I'm just going to start from now on. For now on, I'm going to call France Paris and Paris France, just because why not? I like that system.
Islas Vírgenes, the name Christopher...
Oh no, it's not after Queen Elizabeth again, is it?
Columbus gave to them upon European discovery. And finally, the
But why did he call them the Virgin Islands? Has it got anything to do with a European monarch and their sex life? Because if there's several named after it, that's getting ridiculous.
many U.S. outlying islands have various origins. Baker Island and Wake Island, the Johnston Atoll and Kingman Reef were named after sea captains. Jarvis Island was named after 3 people, all named Jarvis, who discovered the island apparently. Midway Atoll was named for its location being approximately halfway between North America and Asia. Howland Island was named after a whaling ship, and the Palmyra Atoll was also named after the locally shipwrecked USS Palmyra, while Navassa Island comes from the Spanish term Nava, meaning plain, since the island is very flat. So that is the origin or supposed origin of each US state, territory, and federal district's names. Do you like the state names, or should some of them be renamed? Also, if new states are to exist, what should they be called? Should they maintain whatever the territory's name is now, or create a new one? Leave a comment letting me know, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I'd be interested to know. Obviously, I know the vast majority of my audience is American. Do you think there should be extra states? I'm sure, or it'd obviously be very politically controversial if they do, because I know you get 2 Senate seats per state, and you get electoral college votes. So I guess it would be. I know there's a movement for Puerto Rican statehood. I think there might be for DC. I guess both of those would benefit the Democrats, but I might be wrong about that. But yeah, that was really interesting. I did not realise so many of them were named after Native American tribes, albeit via rivers. Particularly the ones in kind of the central part of the country, particularly the Algonquin for some reason, who I'm gonna have to look into more because I don't really know very much about them. I'm also really interested that they kept the names of the European monarchs, even though the United States kind of started as a breakaway from European monarchy. So I thought that was a really interesting touch. I mean, I guess it's just in some ways like it's a big faff to change the names, and everyone's got used to the current names. But I'd still be interested to know if there was a debate about that, if there were people who said we should change names, or if it was just, everyone accepted the name and there was no issue with it. But yeah, either way, that was really interesting. I really, really found that interesting. I hope you enjoyed that. If so, please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I hope to see you again for the next video. Thank you.